Hey guys, happy Saturn Day Sabbath. So today I decided to do a video instead of going live because what I want to discuss, I kind of want to allow it to be channeled within me without distractions because I'm not exactly sure how the divine wants me to deliver it to you guys. So I had a pretty big branch that fell in my backyard the other day, and it was probably about the size of a small tree. And it was interesting because as I was doing what I could within my own power to cut up this branch, there were different things that kind of were going through my mind, and I felt like it was a time for me to kind of sit and listen to what God was placing in my heart in that moment. And this is the first time I've ever tried to really break up a big branch like this. So I borrowed some shears from my neighbor and I started taking off the little branches with the leaves as much as I could. And it was interesting because I started off slow, trying to just kind of chop it, and that ended up taking more energy trying to do it slowly than instead of just going in with like a swift chop. And what that said to me is that sometimes it's easier to cut things off that maybe aren't as big in our lives, that don't take up as much energy, or that aren't connected to me or us as much, like say you have an acquaintance or something like that, and you don't feel like you align with them. It's a lot easier to cut those kinds of connections off swiftly than it is to do it more gently. But the bigger ones, they take a little bit more effort. The shears aren't enough. You gotta, either break out an axe or a chainsaw or something to that effect to break it up. But when I got this land, I took these trees on as my responsibility. So it's my responsibility to take care of the branch, right? And even if I can't take care of the branch within my own power, I also have the ability to ask other people that are in my support network to assist me with breaking it down further, because I can't just leave it there, right? If I leave it there, then, I could get a ticket from the city, or it's going to make it even harder to mow my lawn, like grass is going to die underneath it, all these things that can happen from just leaving it, right? Maybe some animal's going to build a nest in it or something, I don't know, but I knew that the branch needed to be taken care of. And I think we all have things like that in our lives where we know something has fallen apart. We know that it needs to be taken care of. We know that there are certain things that are in our power that we can do. But what I've noticed is if we make that effort to do what we can within our own power, people see that and they're more likely to step up and help you to do the rest. And sometimes it's just having the courage to go out there and start, even if you don't know exactly how to do it at the time. There are resources that you can look into. There's tons of videos on YouTube. We have Google at our disposal now. And if you think about this in the terms of relationships, there are a lot of resources if you have the courage to ask the right questions and if you have the capacity. You know what I mean? Because sometimes we don't exactly know. We know something's wrong, but we don't really know the right question that we should be asking. And sometimes that comes to us through small divine revelations, and I think it's very helpful to have people in our lives that have dealt with similar situations that we can go to and ask them, like, hey, I have a similar situation and I'd like to know, like, how did you deal with this? Is there an easier route for me to deal with this? Like, maybe going in with the shears was too much. Maybe I should have just waited for the chainsaw. You know what I mean? Like, but it's all part of the learning. And then when I tried to go and burn the branches, they didn't quite burn right away because they were still pretty much alive. They need this drying out period before they really catch flame. And yeah, you can use gas, and that can speed up the process sometimes. But sometimes you don't want to use all of your gas. Gas is like $4 a gallon right now. Why would you want to use all of your resources when you can wait and wait for it to dry out and then try again at a later time? But there's also a balance of knowing, are you willing to use your resources to do it quicker, or are you willing to wait and do it later? Because there are times in our lives where we can invest in moving along faster. And if you're not willing to invest that, then you're investing in time, if that makes sense. You can kind of jump ahead, but if you're not willing to invest, you can wait, and you're spending your time in the waiting instead of spending your money for the progression. And I don't believe that there's really any right or wrong answer to that. It's really in your, I would say, your own intuition, your own values, things like that. Because there were times where I wish I wouldn't have spent so much time in certain situations, in certain relationships. But my mindset and the way that I was perceiving things kind of kept me in a prison there. And if I would have had the revelations and the ways of thinking about it that I have now, then I probably could have saved myself 5 years of my life. You get what I'm saying? And 5 years is a lot. You know, the average human might get like 80 years here if we're lucky. So, 5 years is a good piece of that. And I think it's important for us to be self-honoring with our time and our energy and really look at the things that we're investing our time and our energy in and maintaining and staying in and seeing if they are aligned with our values. But I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the Rumi deck. I think it's by Anna Fairchild, but if you guys have that deck, I know some people just kind of go off of what images they see on the cards, but if you have that deck and you haven't read the guidebook, you're doing yourself a huge disservice because there are so many pieces of wisdom in that, and this is not like sponsored at all. It's just my own opinion. But in the Rumi deck, they do talk about this concept of letting the wood dry out before it burns. And I think that's important to remember too. Sometimes something is still too alive to be set on fire. It has too much water, there's too much emotion. And sometimes you need a drying out period for that to settle, for that to evaporate, for the right conditions for it to make a fire. And, then you'll be cooking with fire, right? But like I said, using the gas, it can evaporate the water a little bit faster, but it's also kind of more money and more resources, more effort than just waiting it out and letting it dry up on its own naturally. If you don't have any reason to really push it ahead, then wait and come back to it, because sometimes we try to push things along when they're not ready yet. And then we end up expending more energy than we really need to. So that feels like the message that I have for you guys today. Thank you for joining me. And if you like this content, please like, share, and subscribe. And I love to see you next week. Okay, bye.